Billionaire father sees black waitress let disabled son lead a dance step, and then changes her life forever. The silence that fell over Grandridge's most exclusive restaurant was so thick, it seemed to have weight. Conversation stopped. Cutlery froze midair. Dozens of eyes locked on the small space between the tables. 10-year-old Noah Whitman was visibly shaking. His legs, trapped in metal braces, wobbled as he reached out to Nina Carter, the restaurant's only black waitress. The live piano had just begun a soft melody, and the boy's impulse to ask someone to dance came without warning. "Sir, control your son," Manager Gregson's sharp voice cut through the silence. "That's inappropriate. This is not a dance hall, and our employees are not here to entertain children." Alexander Whitman, owner of Whitman Global Holdings and one of the richest men in the country, swallowed hard. It was the first time he had taken Noah out to dinner in public since the accident that had partially paralyzed his legs 2 years earlier. A mistake he hadn't dared repeat. "Noah, sit down," the order came low but firm. Nina remained motionless, her gaze shifting between the manager, the billionaire, and the boy, whose hand was still hanging in the air. In her 5 years working there, she had learned to become invisible. Especially to customers like Mr. Whitman. "Mr. Gregson, I'm leaving. My shift is over." Her voice sounded calm as she removed her apron and placed it on the tray. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled at Noah and took his hand. "I can't dance in an apron." Alexander stood up abruptly. "What do you think you're doing?" Nina held his gaze. "I'm accepting an invitation, sir." Before anyone could interfere, Noah took a hesitant step forward. His foot dragged painfully across the floor. The metal of his braces screeched, but Nina didn't guide him. She didn't hurry him. She simply adjusted her own pace to his. "She's getting fired tomorrow," whispered a woman at the next table. Alexander watched, paralyzed. A sudden memory struck him. Eleanor, his late wife, dancing with Noah in the living room. "It's not about perfection," she had once said. "It's about connection." As Nina followed Noah's clumsy steps, something in the boy's eyes changed. Fear gave way to intense concentration. Shame gave way to shy pride. For the first time since the accident, he wasn't being guided, helped, or corrected. He was leading. "Mr. Whitman," the manager's voice interrupted his thoughts. "I can assure you this will never happen again. She'll be properly disciplined." Alexander didn't respond. The entire restaurant seemed to wait for his reaction. After all, a man of his power could end anyone's career with a single word. Employees stopped what they were doing. Other customers watched with morbid curiosity. But Noah's smile was the only thing echoing in Alexander's mind. Nina led the boy back to the table after 3 slow steps. "Thank you for asking me out," she said formally, as if speaking to an adult. "It was an honor." When she turned to leave, Alexander stopped her. "Wait." His voice sounded different, almost unrecognizable to himself. "What's your full name?" "Nina Carter, sir." Alexander nodded slowly. "Nina Carter," he repeated as if memorizing it. Then he took a card from inside his jacket and held it out to her. "My office. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. The entire restaurant held its breath. Nina accepted the card without showing any emotion, though her hand trembled slightly. "Dad," Noah called as she walked away. "Why did you do that?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Alexander looked at his son, and for a brief moment saw not just the child Eleanor had left in his care, but a complete human being. One whose wants and needs he had systematically ignored for 2 years. As dinner proceeded in awkward silence, no one noticed Nina's final glance before she left. Not a glance of fear or resignation, but of calm determination. The kind that sharply contrasted with the storm now brewing in Alexander Whitman's eyes. The lobby of Whitman Tower sparkled. Glass and marble walls reflected the morning sunlight like a jewel box. Nina Carter immediately felt out of place in her best outfit, a navy blue skirt and a white blouse she'd bought on sale. The people passing by wore clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Nina Carter to see Mr. Whitman," she said to the receptionist, who gave her a long, clinical stare before picking up the phone. 18th floor. "Ms. Delaney will see you." In the elevator, Nina took a deep breath and clutched her worn purse to her chest. It wasn't fear she felt. It was quiet determination. She had faced worse. Much worse. Ms. Delaney was a woman in her 40s with a sharp gaze and a posture like steel. "Mr. Whitman is on a conference call. Please follow me." As Nina walked through the mirrored hallways, she felt curious stares from the employees. A black woman being escorted through the executive offices was rare enough to spark speculation. "He had you fired, didn't he?" Delaney asked suddenly when they were alone in the waiting room. It happens. Powerful clients complain, and people like you lose their jobs. People like me? You know what I mean, Delaney said, adjusting her glasses. Employees who don't know their place. Nina smiled, not out of amusement. And where exactly would that place be? Before Delaney could answer, her phone rang. He'll see you now. Alexander Whitman's office took up half the floor. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Oakmere City looked like a toy town. He stood gazing out, his back turned as if the skyline were something he owned. Mr. Whitman, Nina greeted him formally. Alexander turned. His face was a mask of calm but not warmth. Miss Carter. Thank you for coming. He pointed to a chair. Please. The silence that followed was calculated. A tactic Nina recognized. It was the kind of silence meant to make nervous people talk too much. Spill something they didn't intend. Do you have a background? He finally asked. Excuse me? Education. College. Nina met his gaze. Bachelor's degree in child development from Oakmere University. Incomplete master's degree in special education. Something flickered across Alexander's face. Surprise? And you work as a waitress? I work 3 jobs actually. The restaurant, a bookstore on weekends, and tutoring when I can find students. Alexander walked to his desk and picked up a folder. I did some research on you, Miss Carter. I wanted to understand who the person was who. He hesitated. Danced with my son. He opened the folder and revealed printed photos of a small community center. Hope Steps. You founded that 6 years ago? Nina sat up straighter. I co-founded it. With my sister Naomi. A dance program for children with physical disabilities. Alexander flipped through a few pages. Which is now about to shut down, due to lack of funding. Nina showed no reaction. Of course he would know. Of course he would. I didn't come here to ask you for money, Mr. Whitman. Then why did you come? Because you invited me. Alexander chuckled, but it was dry. Fair enough. He stood restless. I want you to work for me. Nina blinked. As a waitress in your house? His face hardened. As a therapeutic companion for Noah. Just saying his son's name seemed difficult for him. Nina noticed his eyes drift toward a photo on the table. A smiling woman holding a baby. I have the best specialists in the country, he said. Therapists, neurologists, psychologists. But what you did yesterday. He stopped, as if the words betrayed him. It was just a dance, Mr. Whitman. It was the first time I've seen him smile since the accident. The admission stung him. I don't want a dancer for my son. I want someone who can do what you did, follow. Not lead. Nina studied the man in front of her. Beneath the control, the money, the power, she saw something else. A desperate, lost father. I can pay you 5 times what you're making now, he offered. Nina stood. No. Alexander looked stunned, like a man unaccustomed to hearing that word. I don't work for people who only see my color or social class before they see my competence, she said calmly. And I definitely don't work for people who try to buy solutions to emotional problems. His face flushed. You're turning down an offer that could solve your financial problems? Out of pride? Out of dignity, Nina corrected. And because your son deserves more than someone hired to pretend to care. She walked to the door, then paused. Noah doesn't need more experts. He needs space to lead his own life. You don't know my son. No, Nina said softly, but I know people like him. People whose physical limitations are nothing compared to the invisible cages we build around them. She took a card from her purse and placed it on the table. Hope Steps. Classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. For PM. If you'd like to bring Noah, the first class is free. As she left, she passed Delaney, who had clearly been listening. You just turned down an offer from Alexander Whitman? She whispered. Are you crazy? Nina smiled. Maybe. But I'd rather be crazy than be someone's property. The following Wednesday, Nina stood behind the reception desk of the Hope Steps Community Center when her sister, Naomi, came rushing in. There's a Bentley parked outside, she whispered, adjusting her hijab nervously. And you won't believe who's inside. Through the window, Nina saw the sleek black car. Noah was in the back seat, looking out anxiously. But Alexander Whitman remained behind the wheel, hands gripping the steering, like he was still deciding whether to flee or stay. He's not coming in, Naomi muttered. Men like him don't walk into places like this. Nina didn't answer. She was watching the boy's eyes through the window. She remembered how they had looked during that short dance in the restaurant. Don't underestimate the power of a determined son, she murmured. They watched. Then, the car door opened. Noah stepped out, adjusting the supports on his legs. And to everyone's shock, Alexander got out too. The billionaire looked completely out of place in casual pants and a sweater. An obvious attempt to dress down. But privilege still clung to him like a second skin. I told you he'd come, Nina said to herself. Naomi gave her a look. What did you do? Nina didn't reply. But her eyes sparkled. With a secret not even her sister fully knew. Hidden beneath her bed in a tiny apartment in South Oakmere was a notebook. Stuffed with notes. Years of observations. Plans. Stories about children like Noah. And men like Alexander Whitman. It had all started with one choice. To accept an invitation to dance. Inside Hope Steps, the walls were decorated with hand-painted signs. Your rhythm, your rules. Every move counts. Children moved freely across the floor, some in wheelchairs, others with prosthetics or crutches. Music played softly in the background. As Alexander and Noah entered, Nina approached, wearing a t-shirt with the program's logo. Welcome. Noah's eyes scanned the room in awe. A girl in a wheelchair spun in place with perfect control. A boy with a prosthetic leg stepped to the beat, confident and unbothered. It looks chaotic, Alexander muttered beside her, clearly uncomfortable. There is structure, Nina replied. It's just not the kind you recognize. She turned to Noah. Would you like to join in? Noah nodded, but looked to his father for reassurance. Go on, Alexander said stiffly. I'll be right here. As Nina guided Noah into the group, Naomi approached Alexander and offered him a chair. The first day is always the hardest, she said gently. For the parents. Not the kids. This isn't therapy, Alexander argued. I hired the best rehabilitation specialists. And how's that been working for Noah? Naomi asked softly. Just then the door opened. An older woman stepped in, leaning on a carved cane. Her hair was braided into elegant gray rose, and her presence commanded the entire room. Naomi whispered, That's Dr. Yvonne Blake, neuroscientist, retired from Westbridge University. The woman greeted a few of the children before noticing Alexander. Mr. Whitman, she said. You've rejected my research proposals 3 times in 2 years. Dr. Blake. I didn't expect to see you here. I oversee this research program, she explained. We're studying how non-directive movement affects brain reconfiguration in children with motor challenges. Research? Alexander frowned. I thought this was a community dance class. Nina returned as Noah practiced with another child. Hope Steps is a pilot rehabilitation program, she explained. We combine adaptive dance with neuroscientific theory. Alexander stared at her. Then why work as a waitress? Because we didn't have the funding. And because people like you rejected us 3 times. The penny dropped. You were the co-author on Dr. Blake's proposal? Correct, Dr. Blake confirmed. Nina had to drop out of her master's to care for Naomi. But her research is groundbreaking. Alexander's voice was low. You knew who I was, at the restaurant? From the moment you walked in, Nina said calmly. And when Noah got up to dance, I saw an opportunity, to show not tell. Was it staged? The dance? Absolutely not. Noah chose to stand. I chose to follow. At that moment, a group of reporters entered the room. Alexander's eyes narrowed. What's this? Part 2 of your plan? Nina gave the smallest smile. Naomi held up a freshly printed magazine article. Revolutionary motor rehab program shows real results. Dr. Blake explained, we published today. We invited the press. You used my son, for a PR stunt? Alexander's voice turned cold. Nina led him into a side room. Photos lined the walls, dozens of children each with notes and handwritten stats on their progress. At the far end was a blank frame. What's that? He asked. Our future. A full rehabilitation center we could build. 500 children a year instead of 50. You orchestrated all this. Nina didn't flinch. You canceled our meeting 4 months ago without reading our proposal. I promised myself I'd find a way. Suddenly Naomi burst in. It's Noah. They rushed back. In the center of the room, Noah stood, surrounded by the other children. Someone had turned off the music. Everyone watched in complete silence. Noah had removed one brace. He was trying to balance with just one. Wait, Nina whispered, stopping Alexander from rushing forward. They watched. Noah took a deep breath, focused, and then took a full step. Unassisted, small, shaky. But his The kids around him cheered. Cameras clicked. Alexander's face, usually unreadable, now filled with tears he didn't try to hide. That, Nina said softly, is why we built Hope Steps. It's not about perfect steps. It's about first steps, on your own. Alexander stood frozen. Not as a billionaire. Not as a CEO. But as a father. For the first time in 2 years, he wasn't watching his son with pity or concern. He was watching him with awe. This could have been done without manipulating me, he said quietly. It could have, Nina agreed. If you'd answered our calls. Or read the proposal. Or shown up, even once. Reporters began noticing Alexander in the room. Cameras pointed his way. Murmurs filled the air. Noah, oblivious to the tension, kept practicing his new step. Focused, joyful, free. Alexander Whitman was cornered. Before him lay 2 paths. Walk away, angry, humiliated, confirming every rumor about his cold and calculated persona. Or embrace the moment his son had created. A moment not driven by influence or wealth, but by will, vulnerability, and movement. He looked at Nina. Then at the room full of kids. Then at Noah. A child who had just stepped into freedom. He cleared his throat. Turned toward the press. A reporter stepped forward. Mr. Whitman, could you comment on your presence at Hope Steps today? Is it true that your foundation rejected this program 3 times? Alexander didn't dodge. Didn't deflect. He looked directly into the camera. You know what's hardest for someone in my position? He spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Admitting when we're wrong. A stunned silence. The Whitman Foundation is pleased to announce a full 5-year funding commitment to Hope Steps, and the construction of a permanent rehabilitation center based on the methodology developed by Dr. Blake and Ms. Carter. Camera flashes exploded. Naomi gasped in disbelief. Alexander raised a hand. On one condition. Everyone tensed. That Ms. Carter retains full autonomy over the program. No corporate interference. No board rewrites. No strings. Nina's eyes widened. She hadn't expected that. But Alexander wasn't done. 3 months later, bulldozers cleared the land beside the old community center. The new Hope Steps Rehabilitation Center was underway. It wasn't the most luxurious building the Whitman Foundation had ever funded. But it was the most innovative. Designed with direct input from children and their families. Nina oversaw the construction daily. Never alone. Noah showed up every week, sometimes with other kids. And shockingly so did Alexander. Often just to observe. Quietly. I never thought I'd see you at a planning meeting, Nina commented one afternoon as they reviewed blueprints. I never thought I'd be studying neuroplasticity at 50, Alexander muttered, flipping through a research article marked with neon post. But here we are. Nina looked at him curiously. Is this still about optics for you? Or, do you really care? Noah asked to remove his second brace last week. I know, Nina said. His last therapist said that'd take at least 2 years. And you told me she was wrong. I fired her because of you. And you were right, she smiled, pointing to a photo of Noah walking with just one crutch. He's progressing faster than anyone predicted. Alexander hesitated. Why did you never accept my apology? Because you never gave one, Nina replied gently. You redirected funding. Changed policies. Signed papers. That's compensation, not apology. He nodded. Fair. 6 months later, the grand opening of the new Hope Steps Center brought in a wave of press, families, and community leaders. The contrast to that first night in the restaurant was staggering. The main hall buzzed with activity. Children danced and rolled and laughed. In the center, Noah, now using only a lightweight brace on one leg, led a short routine with 3 other kids. He moved with a confidence no doctor had predicted. Alexander stood at the back watching. Quiet. Not interfering. He doesn't need you to hold him anymore, Nina said softly, stepping beside him. No, Alexander agreed. But he still needs me to be around. He turned to her. Thank you. For what? For teaching me to follow. A reporter came over. Mr. Whitman, how does it feel to witness your son's progress? Alexander looked at Noah, who was now helping a younger girl find her balance. Proud, he said. Not just of what he's overcome, but of what he's helping others discover. And what's the biggest lesson you've learned on this journey? He paused. Looked directly into the camera. That true leaders aren't the ones who guide others down a path they think is right. They're the ones who have the courage to follow when someone shows them a better way. 1 year later, Hope Steps had expanded to 3 more cities. Its success wasn't just measured in media coverage or foundation reports. It was seen in how children moved, smiled, and believed in themselves again. Nina Carter received the National Pediatric Rehabilitation Innovation Award, and her methodology was adopted in hospitals across the country. She still wore simple clothes, still carried that same worn purse, but now walked into conference halls with the same quiet certainty she had brought to that restaurant floor, the day she followed a child's lead. As for Noah, he now used only a slim cane on difficult days. He had enrolled in a mainstream school, and had become a youth spokesperson for Hope Steps, giving talks about courage, movement, and choosing your own rhythm. At one speech he said, "They said I needed someone to help me walk. But what I really needed was someone to believe that I already could." His story touched thousands, especially one man in the front row. A man who once saw his son as broken, and now saw him as a builder. Alexander Whitman, once obsessed with control, had learned the hardest, and most valuable, lesson of all. That true power doesn't come from controlling every move. It comes from knowing when to step back, and when to let someone else lead. He no longer measured success in company shares, mergers, or skyscrapers. He now measured it in inches. In hesitant steps taken with trembling legs. In a single smile from a child who used to live in silence. And every Thursday without fail he showed up to Hope Steps. Not as a donor. Not as a CEO. Not even as Mr. Whitman. Just as Noah's father. A man learning, finally, how to follow. If this story about how a simple act of dignity changed 3 lives, and then hundreds, touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Because we believe the most powerful revolutions don't begin with grand speeches or billion-dollar fortunes. They begin when one person takes an honest step forward, and another has the wisdom to follow.